We're back on Inside Politics, taking a look at the Tennessee General Assembly as it comes back to Nashville this past week and what's going to happen over the next couple of months. We're talking with reporters Andrea Zielinski, Sam Stockard, and Chaz Sisk. The legislature is going to get involved in a lot of social issues, hot button issues. One is this: there's been a lot of activity out in the state, people wanting to do something to nullify the Supreme Court ruling about same-sex marriage. There's a bill up before the legislature, comes before a House committee next week. But suddenly, Chaz, we found out that if they do this bill, the people who do the fiscal impact for that means it could cost the state $8 billion. Do they really want to do something that bad?
Well, I certainly don't think they do. I mean, that's always the big cudgel for the for a bill like this, is to say that the federal government is going to take away all funding for TennCare if you go forward with it. So I don't think they're going to accept that as a real consequence of it. But I do think they are going to push forward. But if that sticks, then I think that is certainly a deal killer.
Andrew, there may be the relief of the governor if they do decide not to do anything, because there's a pretty good chance if it gets through, it could get through both houses, then wind up on his desk, and he'd have to decide whether he wants to veto or not. And the veto in Tennessee is not very strong.
No, it's not. But you do have the legal question, which seems to be pretty definitive, that this law wouldn't stand anyway, which would probably give the governor that cover. But that doesn't mean that if this isn't that issue that really drives the legislature, that they wouldn't come back just to make a statement.
Sam, let me follow up on what I heard you say earlier. This involves the governor. What we're seeing happening to some degree on what he's dealing with in terms of the gas tax. He said he thought we probably needed a gas tax increase. Now he's decided, after going across the state twice, that there may be public support, but there's not nearly enough legislative support, especially in an election year, a re-election year for them. We've also had this situation with Insure Tennessee. Are we getting into a pattern in his second term that he doesn't have the oomph it takes to get the things done he wants to get done?
Well, and it's pretty surprising, too, because he was overwhelmingly re-elected, and then Insure Tennessee, barely saw the light of day last year. It's probably not going to happen this year based on what they're saying. And then, he just doesn't seem to be able to have the arm-twisting strength to get these big measures passed, and he's kind of waffled back and forth on gas tax increases, fuel tax reform. I don't know if he's able to get his big bills going.
Now, Chaz, one area he has had some success has been in higher education with the Tennessee Promise program and some other things that he's done. Now he wants to change the governance of higher education. He wants to basically take all the Board of Regents schools and give them all separate boards. Now, the chancellor of the Board of Regents has almost quit in protest. He's retired early in opposition to that. Does the governor still have the votes he needs to pass this through the legislature? Is he going to seek that this year?
I don't see any indication that he won't seek it, and in fact, I think Chancellor Morgan's retirement may actually help him some. Chancellor Morgan wasn't really his guy to lead lead.
No, he came into the
right, exactly. So I mean, this gives the governor an opportunity to bring in somebody who maybe is going to be a little bit more on his side on this issue.
Now, Andrea, in recent years, when there have been expansions of boards or new boards created, the legislature has had a tendency to say, hey, wait a minute, we want to do some of those confirmations. Do you think that's likely to come up as an amendment during that process, that if we're going to create all these boards, the legislature wants to have input or confirmation of who's put on those boards?
That's a good question. I mean, the default answer would almost always be yes. If there's a question of, should this decision have legislative input? So no, I would not be surprised if that came up. And what the governor thought about that would be very interesting. I'm sure he wouldn't want to change the current process.
Well, Sam, those posts are going to be, they're volunteer posts. There's no remuneration for it, but boy, I'm sure they would be considered political plums for any governor, and for that matter, the legislature. A lot of people would want to serve on those kind of boards.
Well, there's no doubt about that. The question is whether it's going to be people who really support and love those universities who are appointed to those positions, or whether they're just Haslam's picks.
Chaz, another higher education issue that's coming up, and actually flared up during this past year, and that's the diversity office at the University of Tennessee. They had a couple of situations where some posts were put up on the website. One concerned using gender-neutral pronouns. The other one was about how to do holiday parties so they don't become Christmas parties. Now there's an effort by some Knox County lawmakers for a special committee in the legislature to be appointed right away to report back by the end of March to study this. This appears to be an effort to basically do away with this particular thing, and I think they have a budget of about $5 million.
You mean the office?
The office
Correct.
itself.
Yeah, it's kind of spread around the budget throughout UT, but that's been the estimate, is that it's about $5 million spending total on diversity efforts. A lot of this is stuff that's required by the federal government, so there's really not a lot the legislature could do to stop it. But at the same time, there's been a continuous controversies at UT over the last several years, things that the lawmakers really feel like have been embarrassments for the state. So they're going to, I think they'll definitely try to do something, at least symbolic.
The special committee is going to happen. I know the Speaker in the House, Beth Harwell, has said she's okay about doing it. I haven't heard from Speaker Ramsey, but then he's the one that said heads should roll about this, so I suspect he'll support the committee too.
Oh yeah, I think that's a pretty safe assumption. The Lieutenant Governor hasn't held back very much in his frustration with that office. So I imagine there will be, the doors will be made open, time will be made to have this task force.
The other issue that may be coming up during the legislature, come up every year in the area of education, has been a school voucher program. It's passed, I believe, twice in the Senate, but still seems to be stuck in the House. Is that about where we are again this year, or is a school voucher program, even on a limited basis, likely to be put together this year?
It's probably got a lot better chance to pass this year because I believe they have a new chairman in House Finance Ways and Means, and he's probably a little friendlier to it than the past chairman.
If it gets out on the floor, Andrea, does it have a better chance on the floor than it does in the committee? Sometimes the committees keep things from coming out on the floor. It would pass if it would get there, but you can't get it through the committee.
It's still a little dicey because this is one of those unique situations where you have, right now, you have teachers and you have principals and you have education leaders in all these different counties who are probably telling their local lawmakers, like, hey, that we don't want our public school kids to be going into the private school system and taking those dollars with them. So I think even in more rural areas, you might still, like anywhere that you're going to have a good number of private schools. But yeah, I think the linchpin has really always been that committee. And if it gets to the House floor, I think there's a much greater chance of it passing.
The interest in vouchers has always been more concentrated in the Nashville area and in Memphis, right? And maybe a little bit in Knoxville, some of the larger cities, but the rural areas, not so much, either for or necessarily against it, although probably leaning against. Why change anything?
Right. I mean, I think that's the difference, is that there's just not as many private schools in the rural areas, and so there's just not as much impetus to do this.
Andrea, we talked earlier about the legislature making appointments to these boards. One of the ones that the voters gave them the right to do is to confirm in both houses appointments to the state Supreme Court. They didn't do that last year. Now they actually have an appointment to the Supreme Court pending, and they still don't know what the process is, and they're having trouble trying to figure it out, aren't they? They
are, and I think much of the crux comes down to trust of the other chamber or of the executive branch of government. Everybody says, no, everybody's fine right now, we trust each other.
They're fine with the nominee. They don't have a problem with him.
The nominee, Roger Page, everybody's fine with him, and he would coast through. But before they can do that, they have to set up the system where they essentially have to figure out how much are they going to trust each other and what kind of safeguards are they going to put in case one chamber decides to monkey around a little bit because they don't like an appointment. Then what happens next?
Well, and it's also whether they vote together in a joint session or whether they vote separately, and then there's 99 House members, only 33 senators. How do they balance off the fact that the House vote actually would count for 3 more than the Senate vote? So Chaz, what are they going to do? I mean, I assume the clock is ticking on this nominee, and within 60 days, if they don't act, he's going to be confirmed. But that's kind of a bad way to start that process, isn't it? You don't even vote on the first one that you asked to be able to vote on?
It is, but I mean, as with the Jeremy Durham caucus vote, the procedures that you set up often determine the outcome. So I don't see any reason why they wouldn't fight this thing out to the end, especially if they are in favor of the nominee. Why not just let him go into office and keep fighting this fight here?
Let's take a break. We're talking with reporters about what's going on up at the Capitol Hill for the next couple of months as the state legislature is back in town, the 109th General Assembly. We're talking with Chaz Sisk of Nashville Public Radio, Andrea Zielinski from Nashville Post, Nashville Scene, and also Sam Stockard, who works for the Nashville Ledger and for Murfreesboro Post. Back to continue our conversation after you watch these messages.